All right, let's do this. What do you say? It is Unfound live for July 13th, 2026. Yes, it seems like I just did this a few days ago, which I did because if you will remember, of course, we moved last week's live show to Tuesday because of soccer, and as I stated back then, I should have just done the show last Monday night and ignored that game last Monday. But here we are at our regular time and place and channel and headquarters right here in Clearwater Beach, Florida. I have a spectacular show for you. Put it together. Took me a little while today because I had a lot of information to accumulate and decide what I wanted to discuss. And I finally narrowed it down to the essentials. And so I hope to entertain you and inform you over the next 2 hours because that's what I do. And while you are watching / listening, and it's okay if you just listen, you do not have to look at me. What's more important is what you're listening to and not what you're saying. While you are listening tonight, I hope you will consider supporting Unfound through a variety of ways. Patreon.com/Unfound podcast. You can get the episodes early. You can get them without ads. You can get the Found series there where I look at disappearances that have been solved. If you step up to the premium level, you can become part of the think tank when we get together on Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock. I think you might enjoy that. So you can check that out. PayPal.me if you feel like just spontaneously, just in the mood. Well, Unfound is doing a fine job. I think I'll send Ed and everybody a couple bucks. You can do that at PayPal.me/Unfound podcast. If you are in the chat tonight, you can do the super chat function and contribute that way. I think all of you have seen people do that in the past. You can only do that while it is live. And I realize on some apps you cannot see the super chat button. And then also you can join, in addition to subscribing to the channel, you can join the channel and get some things there that everybody else doesn't get. So you consider doing that. All of that while you are taking partaking in tonight's live show. In addition, as you are listening tonight, you can hit the thumbs up button. If you are new to Unfound, have never heard of it before, just new, I don't know what rock you've been under, but it must be a big one. You can hit the subscribe button right down there in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. So as the title says, as I always say, when whatever I put in the title, those are topics which are guaranteed to be covered tonight. So we're going to take a look at the 1976 disappearance of Dorothy Scofield, occurring in a city that I know a little bit well, being that I've played disc golf there a few times over the years, and I go through that town when I'm going back and forth to Pennsylvania. Ocala, Florida. We're going to take a look at her 1976 disappearance going back 50 years. I'll explain that when we get to it. Also, I want to take a look at the murder of Chelsea Yasser, Yasser. That is a murder, an actual murder, not a disappearance, but a murder that occurred 10 years ago in the state of Colorado. And it's getting some new attention. They're trying to figure out what happened. There is video of this murder, but it is still unsolved. And it's been in the news, national news. So I want to take a look at that. And then, due to a listener sending me a message over Messenger on Facebook about a couple different things, she had asked me my opinion about the lost colony of Roanoke. And I gave her a reply. We had a nice back and forth about that. And so I thought that I might just bring that to all of you tonight as well. But as is usually the case, I come to this microphone with a lot to discuss, and I always make sure that I have more information, more news or whatever, more stories, more cases, whatever else I need than I think I'm going to need. We'll see how it goes tonight. But I hope all of you have had a great week since we all got together, and allow me to just kind of give you my life since we all got together last Tuesday. Of course, it's not been a full week. It's only been 6 days instead of 7. The day after we got together last week, of course, last week was Tuesday. On Wednesday, my trivia team did not have a very good night. We decided to go for it on the final question, and for the first time in a long time, we took a 0. So we went from like second in the rankings down to about 10th or something very early on in the season, though we have many weeks to go. The season does not end until the end of September. So, if you're going to take a chance on something, now is the time. I don't like taking zeros. And what I mean by that, it's no different if you've seen Jeopardy when somebody bets all their money at the end. It's kind of like that. We put all our points, and it turns out that Cracker Jack, Arizona is not a real place. Who knew? So we blew that, took a 0, and so we're going to have to live with that. And we got a lot of time. The good news is that only a couple teams got it right. And so we could have dropped down a lot more, but nobody really went for it. It seems everybody, for the most part, was kind of confused or in the dark regarding the final question. And so we really did, even though we dropped, it could have been way, 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 way worse. So we're fine. But we took a 0 for the first time in quite a while, and like I said, I usually like to avoid those, but if you're going to do that, let's do that early. As far as my Saturday trivia team, we won, and we won what I would say was pretty easily. I think we were in first place the whole time, and we easily got the final question, and it had to do the question was all of these groups have done a version of a particular song, and what was that song? There was like 5 or 6 different bands or singers there, and you had to name the song that they all had done at one time or another. And the song was The Locomotion. Do the Locomotion with me, that song. So, and I think a lot of teams got it right. We got it right. We bet as many points as we could. And so after last Wednesday taking a 0 with that group of people, it was nice to come back and win with a different team on Saturday, because all of you know how much I love to win. And It's weird. I played different roles on each team. Um, on the Wednesday team, I actually have knowledge that is different than the rest of my teammates, so I can oftentimes fill in blanks for things. But on the Saturday team, my perception is that my knowledge of things is very similar to the rest of the team. And if we were doing like what is a Venn diagram or whatever, the circles or whatever, the circles of my knowledge and the circles of the other would be greatly overlapped. But still, we do well. And even though you would think under normal circumstances, you want to have a team that's very diverse of knowledge, but on Saturdays, we've proven to be able to win, even though I do think that a lot of us have the same kind of knowledge. Maybe it's just, of course, the questions that are asked. And but to be honest, the trivia that I take part in Wednesday, way more competitive than on Saturday. If only for the reason, like on Wednesdays, we're talking to like 25 teams, 120 some people. Saturdays, maybe 12 or 13 teams, maybe 60 people or something like that. So that certainly makes a difference. Now, you may be wondering, well, what about the people that I used to play with, my old team that I was with for years and years and years? Well, my brother and his wife, of course, they moved to Polk City. So they're really, they're not around here anymore to play or anything. But my couple of my former teammates, they now get together. They also get together on Wednesdays, but they go coincidentally to a place we used to go, but now it's under new management. It has a new name. So I guess they've been going there. How have they been doing? I really don't know. I don't know if they've been cleaning up like we used to do all together or not, but they're playing over there on Wednesdays, just like with my new team, but at a different place. So if you were wondering. So that's what's going on with trivia. As far as like soccer, I continue to watch. I'll be watching tomorrow. We're down to the Final Four, I guess you could call it, just like they have like March Madness, the Final Four. The team that beat the United States, they lost to Spain on Friday, although it was somewhat of a close game, I would say, in my opinion. And so we're down to the Final Four of Argentina, England, France, and Spain, which they are the top 4 ranked teams in the world. So I guess it's only appropriate that they get to the Final Four. Tomorrow, who plays who? I think Spain and France play tomorrow. I think. One plays tomorrow, one plays Wednesday. I think they both play at 4:00 Eastern. I plan on partaking in both of them, depending on what I have going on here. But it's England against Argentina, so the Brits against Lionel Messi and company, and then Spain versus France. And of course, France has Kylian Mbappe. He's another spectacular player, and of course, Spain is very good. I think everybody, as far as competitiveness and competition, everybody is getting what they wanted. The top 4 teams would have been the United States. Cool for the United States to be in there. The TV numbers would have been, I can't even imagine what they would have been. Even so, even them just getting to the final 16, the numbers were crazy for TV. But the United States still has a ways to go. I think they're in the conversation, but I think the United States, to be competitive, they just have to play. It's not like these other teams are totally, totally out of their league. Meaning, if the United States plays its best, those teams are still going to blow them out. It's not like that. I think the United States, the current team as it was constructed for this World Cup, if they were to play their absolute best game, I think that they would have a chance of beating all four of these teams. But, if it's going to be best against best, so France, England, whoever, playing at their best against the United States playing at their best, those teams are probably going to win 8 out of 10 times, something like that. So, but that's just the way it goes. And given that I've been watching or listening to a lot of soccer podcasts, a lot of people, different opinions, and of course, last Tuesday, I drew a lot of comparisons between the status of soccer here in the United States and the problem we have with disappearances in the United States. It continues to be that you have a lot of people very knowledgeable regarding soccer and how to play it, how to organize it, and all those things. But you do not hear a lot of agreement among people who are knowledgeable about how to get to that next level. And of course, that's the problem. You have a lot of people who care. Absolutely. And genuine care. But like with anything, everybody has to be rowing in the same direction. And it's obvious the fallout from the United States losing, that's just not happening right now. And we'll just have to see how it's going to go. But I've certainly enjoyed the World Cup. I enjoy world sports. I love watching the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics. I know a lot of Americans, aren't into that stuff or whatever. Of course, soccer, that's not our sport. But I love watching countries compete against each other. And I'd like to see the United States do well no matter what it is. I like the world championships and in track and field and all of that as well. So I'm into it. And but now that it's over, bringing me to the next topic before we get into the true crime section of the show tonight, being that the soccer isn't on as much. We're down, just a few games left. Going back to my Pirates, who I haven't been watching, have not been listening, kind of been tuned out away from them because they were kind of on a downturn. And then what do you know? They finish, of course, we're coming up on the All-Star game tomorrow, but they finish the first, it's not really, it's a little over half the season. They finish it on a 3-game winning streak. And bizarrely, they have scored the most runs in Major League Baseball. I mean, that is crazy. I mean, you talk about crazy, crazy, crazy. They have scored 516 runs so far this year. That is tied for first. And still, they're only 3 games over 500, which should tell you how bad their pitching has been. The funny thing is the other team that is tied for the most runs doesn't have a winning record. So, it's a really weird season, but they finished on a high note, 3 in a row, 3 games over 500. And I have to believe they're going to make some moves when it comes to their pitching staff. They have so many people that are hitting so well. Maybe they can afford to make a few trades, get a couple pitchers in here, and who knows? Who knows what can happen if the pitching and the run production can continue like this, and if the pitching just even gets like 10% better. I think we have to be looking at playoffs for the Pirates. That would be something. Now you watch, they'll come back from the All-Star break and lose 15 in a row. Anything's possible, I guess. But so they have the best offense in baseball after last year having the worst offense in baseball. They brought some people in, some people have gotten hot, and the weird part is some of their best hitters are injured right now. I mean, I don't even know how to even begin to explain that. It's crazy. It is absolutely insane. So if you want to watch a team that scores a lot of runs, turn on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Speaking of baseball, last Friday, my brother and I went to a Rays game, my first Rays game for this year. Wanted to get out and do that with Brian before he and his wife left on their RV trip for 3 months. And we went Friday night. The Rays won. A bunch of home runs were hit. Had a good time hanging out with Brian. Took the Mustang, drove it down to the game. That was fun. And I sat beside this little boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. And it's just kind of funny. I'm just sitting there minding my own business. My brother's sitting to my right. And this kid is sitting to my left. And he's there with his parents and maybe siblings or whoever. And he's just sitting there. And he just starts talking to me. I'm not even looking at him or anything, but he goes, "Are you a Rays fan?" I was like looking out at the field or something, and it didn't say hi to him or anything. He just struck up a conversation with me. He just said, "Are you a Rays fan?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, not really. I'm actually a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. I'm originally from there." And then we just ended up talking the whole game. This tenor, like I said, he was surely still in Little League. His name was Matt. And he was, I think he was a Seattle Mariners fan. He wasn't even a Rays fan, but he was there to cheer on the Mariners there. But I think he was from Fort Pierce, Florida. He was there with his family. And we just we just talked the whole game about baseball and whatever. He was just talking my ear off the whole time. And it was just kind of funny, though, how he didn't say like, "Hey, hi, my name's Matt," or anything. He just said, "Hey, are you a Rays fan?" Just, I think what it is, it's just the innocence of it. We as adults, we tend to be so insulated, not that we're rude or anything, but we kind of just keep to ourselves. And we sit down beside somebody at a game, we're kind of ourselves. We're there with somebody else, and we're not sure who that other person may end up having 10 beers and get thrown out of the game or anything. So we're kind of afraid, to talk to the people around us. I think that's generally how people are. Not that we're rude. Of course, if something happens and we're cheering, hey, there's a home run, of course, we all delight in that. But then, it takes the innocence of a child just to strike up a conversation. And, just to ask you, he came up with like the perfect opener, like, "Hey, are you a Rays fan?" It was so good. It was so good. And my brother enjoyed it as well. So a good little kid. You could really tell, raised well, behaved himself, smart, knew how to talk, knew how to have a conversation and everything. He was left-handed like I am. And, he talked about being a Mariners fan, and he was giving me all these stats that he knew and everything. And, and I don't have any kids, but I don't want anybody ever to think that I don't like kids. I just don't want to take care of them. I can talk to them, and all those things, but I just don't have the patience for discipline and caring and stuff like that. It's the reason I don't have any pets. But just to sit there and talk to him during the game, that was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So let's see who is in here. Hello, Charlie. What's going on? Did Brother Brian tell me you might be going to Ohio or something, Charlie? Hello, anyone. That's funny. Hello, Amy. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Mary. Thank you, Charlie. Nephew Charlie, you are very generous. LaFord, good to see you. D, what's going on? Diamond, good to see you. Former guest of Unfound. Yeah, I love it. Originally from Pittsburgh. Are you, Diamond? I don't think I knew that. I love his innocence. Me too. Mary loves the live show. Me too. Hello, Sarah. Good to get your message this week. Thank you. And D says, me and Nick may be in Florida. Ed, will you let me know? And D, did you hear? I told you this past Friday. Wish Nick a happy 12th birthday. I'm hoping you heard that, D. Yeah, yes, for my Boy Scout troops 100th anniversary this weekend. Wow, look at that. All right, Charlie. All right, let's get to, and thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Thank you for taking a little bit out of your Monday night to take part. So let's get to the true crime stuff. Let's just start here. Atlantic series, 9 episodes in. Of course, this past Friday, I kind of tried to cover all of the disappearances that I could not reach somebody, but I like I stated, when we do the update episodes every 3 or 4 months, and of course, very early on, I felt really guilty. Okay, I'm mentioning these people because there's updates and their disappearances. But then all these other people, there's no updates for their cases, and I feel really bad they're not going to get mentioned. And that is how it started, that I ended up naming everybody during the update episodes. That's how it started. And of course, now the list is 400 people long. And so when it came to the series, I kind of got kind of the same feeling that, okay, I reached these people, all these people that I interviewed, and their disappearances got featured. But now there's all these other people who I tried to reach and couldn't. And now I guess I'm not going to be able to feature those disappearances like Diane Jenkins and some others. And it's like, I can't do that. I got to talk about these people. I have to do it. So that is how episode 9 came to be. And I got some nice responses. I think people liked that I did that. And maybe the best thing is that it came in under 2 hours, and I packed a lot of disappearances with a lot of information in kind of a short time span. I was able to find articles for most of the disappearances, articles that were written back at the time that they happened, and could read some of those and tell you the date and the publication in case you have a newspapers.com account and you want to go look at the articles as well. So I felt really good about being able to do that. And also, I think many of you do like it when I kind of give some of my insight, maybe a little theory here and there, which is something, as you know, I really, really, really hesitate to do on the episodes. And, but you should know, I am absolutely 100% open to featuring any of those disappearances in the future, should I happen to come across somebody who knew one of those missing people, whether it's Jesse Markham or Diane Jenkins or any of those many, the long list of people who were featured in episode 9. Should I somehow, just one day when I don't have a lot to do, which is rare, reach out to any of these people who might know these people, you might hear one of those disappearances as an upcoming standalone episode. Can't say when that might happen, but I don't want you to think just because they've already been covered in episode 9 that doesn't mean they can't get their own episode eventually. Certainly, I'd really, I did my best. And so I'm motivated, really wanted to do a standalone episode if I could talk to somebody who knew, Gary Weaver and Jairo Sanchez, or like I said, Diane Jenkins, or any of them. Certainly would have been ecstatic to give them a standalone episode. Just wasn't able to get it done. That doesn't mean I won't be able to do that in the future. So I'm open to doing that. D says, yes, you did hear it. And did Nick hear it as well, D? Did Nick hear that I was wishing him a happy birthday? I'm hoping you played that for him. Hello, Lisa. Yeah, and D, what's going on? Good to see you. And for some reason, the people above me are doing something to their floor, pounding on the floor. Usually there's nobody above me, so that's weird. I don't know what they're doing up there. Anyway, so the next question may be, are you open to doing another series? The answer is yes. And in fact, Eric and I have already talked about doing one. We've thrown around a couple of ideas. One would be a really in-depth coverage of just one disappearance, but spread out over many episodes. That's a possibility, given one that we've been working on behind the scenes for quite a while. But then another one, I don't want to say too much. The other one, though, would, of course, this one was geographic. It was, it was contained within a certain geographic and time span. Whereas the one that I have thrown around to idea, it's around a certain idea. And could all of these particular disappearances be connected by an idea? Can't say more than that. So we'll just have to see. Not going to happen this year, pretty sure. But maybe we can make it happen for sometime next year. Of course, I thought this series was going to come out in 2025 due to FOIA issues and Coast Guard issues and this, that, and the other. And Eric, with his work and everything, it kind of got pushed to this year, but I'm glad it did, because surely if I'd done it last year, wouldn't have been as many episodes. We wouldn't have covered many disappearances. So there you go. So this coming Friday is going to be episode 10. It will be the last one. And I'm interviewing Eric tomorrow, I think. We talked about Tuesday night, but we have not agreed on a time yet. But sometime tomorrow, during the All-Star game for baseball. And I'll get him interviewed. We're going to just look back at the entire series. He's continued to do some work on some things. I don't know how much he's going to be able to talk about it during the interview. And we're going to just look back and take a look at, what was deduced. I'm going to give him an opportunity to give his opinion on at least some of the disappearances featured, mainly the standalone episodes. And we'll call it a night for the Atlantic series. 10 episodes, 2.5 months. Man, that went fast. It seems like, just yesterday that Eric, I interviewed him for episode number 1. And, doing the interviews I did with Anita and Denise, of course, Angela's sisters, it seems like yesterday. That was way back in April. That is crazy. I just don't know where the time goes. Here we are halfway through the summer. Moving on to something else. Episode 3 of Your 2-Minute Disappearance Lesson is out, and where I talk about how logic and common sense are not usually very helpful when you're trying to deduce what happened in a disappearance. That is now up on the YouTube channel. I hope you will check it out. It's only 2 minutes. I think you can spare the time. Share it, and I'm going to continue to do those. I have a lot, like I said, I have a lot of those planned. As you know, if you're listening to this live show, you know I have a lot of ideas up in my head about disappearances and my unique insights and everything. So we got a long way to go on that, especially given that they're only 2 minutes at a time. So I hope you check that out. And logic and common sense, why they are unhelpful and why you should more rely on your experience, what you know about disappearances. Of course, you actually have to know disappearances to be able to rely on your knowledge for them. Then if you're wondering also, well, what are we doing? You should know in the meantime that I have been doing the series, the episodes coming out. I have been talking to people about disappearances, like I usually do, outside of Florida. And we'll be getting back to that, although not right away. I think I'm going to, I wouldn't say take off a couple weeks, but gonna have a couple revisitations. I want to, how I like to go back and look at those disappearances that were featured early in Unfound's history, and I like to replay them, maybe do some new commentary, new insight. All of you are very more experienced now. I am more experienced now. Play the interview again. Maybe we'll hear something different. So you can expect a couple of those within the next, coming up. And we'll get some, then we'll mix in some new interviews, new disappearances. I think I've talked to at least started collecting information, talking to people about 3 different disappearances. At least while the series has been going on, because the series, once the series starts, it has to go through, and I wasn't going to put some disappearance from Iowa right in the middle of a series about Florida in the 1980s. So everybody had to wait until the series was done. So we'll be getting back to looking at disappearances in the rest of the United States. And we'll get back to doing that. But like I said, I'm going to maybe take a couple weeks with some revisitation episodes. No, I've not picked them out yet. But maybe, what's this Friday, July 17th, July 21st? So maybe let's say the first Friday in August, we'll get back to featuring new disappearances. Just to give you a forecast of what's going to be going on. And of course, I can't talk about that without stating, whose birthday's coming up? Yes, mine, in less than 3 weeks. August 1st, if you've forgotten, you should never forget. August 1st is my birthday, 1970. Of course, that means I will be turning 56 years old. It's crazy. It is absolutely 100% insane. So that's on a Saturday, and the way I always remember it, whatever day July 4th is on is the day that my birthday is on. They are separated by exactly 4 weeks. So there you go. That is pretty much everything that is going on here at Unfound right now. Really haven't no interviews coming up, although there is a magazine feature that will be coming out sometime, but it will not be like within the next week or anything. But once again, I've been asked to be interviewed for a publication in Arizona. of all places. So that'll be coming out. Don't know the exact date. But other than that, that's really about anything else that's really just kind of getting back to regular stuff now that this series is ending, and opening my eyes up again to the rest of the world, and leaving the 1980s and the Atlantic coast of Florida for now and probably forever. Because, one of the main things you have to understand about covering that area at that time, that if you look at the Atlantic coast in the 1970s, nowhere near as many disappearances. If you look at the Atlantic coast of Florida during the 1990s, nowhere near the amount of disappearances, although there are some. The 1980s, there were so many, and I think in featuring all those disappearances, I think we now know why. That's exactly the reason I did it. That's exactly the reason. And I also hope that in featuring all those disappearances, that we put a big hole in this whole hoax out there about the Bermuda Triangle. The fact is, although I'm certainly open to the idea that some of those disappearances are foul play, more than just Angela and Teresa, but some of the others. But I think what we established over all these weeks in the episodes is that you just had a lot of people, shady people, doing risky things, doing things, for big money that they shouldn't have been doing. And because of that, it's illegal, taking risks, doing this, doing that, taking shortcuts, probably not skilled enough to be in those planes, in those boats. Should not be too surprised when people like that go missing. Should not be surprised. All right. What am I going to do first? Of those items, and we got an hour and 15 minutes, I'm going to go to let me make sure I got this name right. Just a moment, please. Yes, okay. I want to first take a look at the murder of Chelsea Yasser. This is a murder. They're refocusing on it. This is a murder that's over 10 years old now. It occurred in the parking lot of a Burlington coat factory. And Charlie, this is out in your neck of the country. Maybe you've heard about this murder, Charlie, in Aurora, Colorado. And it caught my eye over the last couple days on Facebook, just in doing my general Google searches for crime and everything that I do from day to day. And the Aurora Police Department is going to be starting maybe they've already started it now. They've started a podcast series regarding Chelsea's murder. And if you want to check it out, I've not listened to it yet, just so you know. But the podcast is called The White Whale, the Chelsea Yasser story. And it's not being done like some true crime podcast host. This is actually being done by the Aurora Police Department. And dare I say, more police departments should be doing this stuff. Even though I know they'd probably say, well, there's only so much we can say and everything. I fully 100% support police departments doing this, because I think they start doing it themselves, they become more comfortable with people like me, people like John Lorden, people like friend of the podcast, Heather Grotman, and everybody else who do good work out here. But unfortunately, what we do is grouped in with a bunch of yahoos. But I think that if more police departments, I don't care if it's a city, county, state, whatever, I think they do this, I think they'll be more comfortable in saying, oh, yeah, maybe this is a good idea. And maybe, we should be taking advantage of the media that's out there instead of blowing these people off and not returning their emails and, ignoring their FOIA requests and everything else. Just maybe. Charlie says, interesting, Aurora right up the road. Yeah. Isn't that where that theater shooting was, Charlie? Was that in Aurora, Colorado as well for the Batman movie? Somebody, maybe Charlie or somebody else can remind me of that. Anyway, I think this is also significant other than just the police department doing it. It's also significant in that Chelsea, she wasn't homecoming queen. She wasn't a pillar of the community. The fact is that Chelsea Yasser was a prostitute. And that a police department is devoting a podcast series to try to solve the murder of a sex worker is wow. Wow. And I give the Aurora Police Department all the credit in the world to do this. We all know, I mean, we're 10 years into Unfound. We know how police departments treat certain people of certain demographics. But that they're choosing to launch this new podcast and they're choosing her as like the first case that they're going to talk about, I give them all the credit in the world. Good for them. Really, really, really good for them. Thank you. Interesting, right up the road. Yeah, so Aurora is the same place where that guy went in dressed up as the Joker through the fire exit and shot that was Aurora, Colorado too. All right. Well, I guess my memory is not yet failing me. All right, so let's take a look at Chelsea's unsolved murder. And of course, acknowledging we don't do murders here. Of course, some of the disappearances certainly featured on Unfound are murders, but we don't do outright murders here. So I preface that before we get into this, even though, of course, I've talked about Missy Beavers and some other unsolved murders, Zodiac, etc. But Chelsea Yasser was 21 years old. She was a sex worker. She was advertising her services on Backpage. Of course, Backpage now is defunct. It was considered to be corrupt or whatever. The FBI seized the whole thing. It doesn't exist anymore. But she was doing that back then. I don't know how long she had been doing it. I don't know how many customers she had. I don't know how much money she was making. I don't know. Tried to find some of this out, just the information not out there. At least I even found a blog that had written about her murder, and it's not included in that either. But she was using Backpage to do this. Of course, we know that people use Craigslist. We had the Craigslist killer and all of that. But she was using Backpage to find her clients. And what happened was that obviously she met somebody online. Somebody inquired about her services. And there's video of her waiting at a Burger King in Aurora. I don't know, maybe there's more than one, but at one of them. And she gets into a van, and it is a maroon 1995 to 1998 Ford Windstar. They don't make them anymore. Ford, I remember these vans. We sold them at the dealership that I worked at back in the 1990s for my family. I can picture it in my mind. It was Ford's kind of answer, of course, to like Chrysler minivans, the Voyager, and all that. And like I said, they don't make them anymore. I don't know when they stopped making them, but She gets into this van, and I'm just going to read what was written. Chelsea Yasser was a 21-year-old woman who was fatally stabbed, not shot, stabbed in May 2016 in the parking lot of a Burlington store in Aurora, Colorado. Despite the attack being captured on surveillance cameras, the suspect has never been identified. In June 2026, the Aurora Police Department launched a new true crime podcast titled The White Whale. Why they called that, I don't know. The Chelsea Yasser story to generate fresh leads. The podcast takes listeners inside the investigation, focusing on the dark red van that the killer used to flee the scene. Authorities urge anyone with information to contact the Aurora Police or Metro Denver Crime Stoppers. So once again, she's at this Burger King. She gets picked up by this van, seemingly with a guy in it. So it's important to understand she was not abducted. She wasn't walking along the street. A van, pulled up and, took her in. Certainly made arrangements somehow with this person. She was waiting at this Burger King. She gets into this van, then at some point later, and it's unclear to me how much time there was between her being picked up and her being seen on the video at the Burlington. This is still, even though I did my best to try to put the information together, it's still unclear to me how long this span was. But what ended up happening was that somebody came along later that night and found her still barely alive in the parking lot. Like around 10 p.m., somebody was driving through the parking lot, saw her there, called 911. She was rushed to the hospital. She died. So, of course, they went and looked at the video from this Burlington Coat Factory parking lot, and you can see still shots of it if you were to Google it. I don't think maybe the video's out there too. I don't know. But there are still shots of this with the van in it, so you can see it for yourself. And it seems that the stabbing occurred in the parking lot. So she got picked up. There is a passage of time. The van comes into this parking lot. Something goes on. And while she is being stabbed, she manages to open the passenger side door. So she's on the front passenger side. She manages to open the door and kind of get out or fall out of the van. And the van takes off. There's no, whoever the killer is did not attempt to get out of the van to kind of put her in it. Didn't attempt to turn around and run her over. It seems that she falls out of the van. I guess the killer closes that door and the killer takes off. And like I said, 10 years later, we don't know who that person is. As you would imagine, when we have people get so frustrated with these cameras, they show things, but they're not precise enough to see license plates and everything. That's not why they're there. All right. The cameras that you see in Walmart parking lots and McDonald's parking lots and wherever else, they're not meant to necessarily catch criminals, although sometimes they do. If somebody comes, like if it's a car dealership, somebody comes in vandalism, sometimes they can. Really, they're there for insurance reasons. If something happens in the parking lot, well, what really happened? There's a fender bender or somebody claims they slipped in the parking lot. Did that really happen? Is this somebody just looking for a quick insurance payout? That's why the cameras exist. Those cameras don't exist, to be an extension of the police department, even though many times they are used. It's no different like ATM cameras. They don't exist necessarily to catch criminals, even though they can be used for that. They can be used for that, but that's not their prime reason for existing. And we have to remember this is night. We know how if you've ever seen a Burlington Coke factory, it's a big building. It has a big parking lot. I mean, really, what are we expecting here? If you're thinking that a camera is going to pick up a license plate at night in a big parking lot, you are hoping for too much. It's just not reasonable. So seemingly everything was fine until they got into this parking lot. The killer stabbed her 11 times. She gets out of the van, falls onto the ground. Van takes off. Like I said, no attempt to make sure that she's dead. No attempt to, cover things up by throwing her back in the van. Nothing like that. And so, in addition, now, what other information do we have? I couldn't find any information. Did she still have her phone on her? Did she still have her purse on her? Did, all of these things? Was there DNA? We don't know. Maybe that is all going to be in this podcast series, and I urge you to check it out for yourself. I've not yet listened to it. Maybe I should put that on my agenda for tomorrow when I am on the treadmill. But whatever the information they've had over the last 10 years hasn't gone anywhere. Now, you would think, well, a maroon Windstar van that would have been 20 years old at that time, you would think it would really stick out. You'd think. I agree with you. Windstars were not a huge seller. They were never as popular as Caravans and Voyagers, or even some of the Chevy minivans that were sold at the time. How many of them could really have been on the road 20 years later? I agree with you. Still hasn't helped. This kind of reminds me, and I know somebody's going to come up with the name. This is reminds me of the murder that's still unsolved in Texas. The woman who was holding a yard sale, and a truck pulled up, and somebody got out and shot her. I know somebody listed. It's kind of the same thing. We know that vehicle was unique. We know that vehicle had some sort of unique sticker in a window. Still, all these years later, that murder is still unsolved. So this is kind of common in being that I brought up Missy Beavers a few minutes ago. We even have that killer on video, and we know what the murder weapon was, on and on and on. That murder is still unsolved. So video, as I've stated, of course, my year 2 minute disappearance lesson, and as I've talked about many times on this live show, video is not a cure-all. In fact, I think that we would really be amazed if we really started for all sorts of crimes when it comes to video, keeping track of how many times video really leads to the solution of a crime. I think it's way less than we think. Remember, Stephen Kocher, caught on video, still missing. Rockford, I'll take the podcast and assignment this week. And good evening to you. Good evening to you, Rockford. That's Liz Barraza in Texas. Thank you, Rockford. I knew somebody would get it. Thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. So, why hasn't this been solved? If the van is unique, of course, if it would have been like a white Sonata like I used to own, of course, those cars are dime a dozen, no wonder. So what could be the reasons that this murder hasn't been solved? And of course, in addition to the fact that they know that she was a sex worker, they know where she was advertising herself. What is the issue here? Well, I think we have to be open to the idea first that whoever did this, once that person, probably, of course, most likely a guy, found out that the van, his vehicle, had been caught on video, probably got rid of it, probably drove it somewhere and just put it in the water. Of course, that would not stop, that would not automatically erase people's memories that he had the van. But it's better him not to be driving it anymore. So there's that. Amy says, just added to my Spotify queue. Good for you, Amy. Good for you. Good job. So there's that. But we realize how many times, even going back to Cherry Mahan with the van with the skier on the side from 1985, that didn't help. The problem is, I don't know what the stats say about vehicles that are seen being used in crimes. Do those criminals usually keep those vehicles? I don't know the stats on that. I don't know. And we, unfortunately, here at Unfound, although we talk a lot about vehicles, we just don't have enough disappearances like that to ever draw any conclusions regarding that at all. But being that it's still unsolved, we have to be open to the idea that the guy thought, oh, my vehicle was seen. I got to get rid of this. What's he going to do? Sell it? Probably not. Probably trashed it. Maybe brought it to a junkyard outside the area, drove it into a lake somewhere, drove it into a river. And then when people started asking him where his van was, you didn't suspect that he was involved in this. He probably could have said, oh, the engine blew up and I had to get rid of it. Who knows? And it's just an idea. We also have to be also open to the idea that we don't know how far, her advertising went. It very well could be that although she's in Aurora, Colorado, and she's there, and this killer was there, that doesn't mean he was from Aurora, Colorado. Maybe he wasn't even from that state. And so they're looking for a maroon Windstar van, around the general Aurora area, when really he's from Kansas, when really he's from Wyoming. And in that case, I think it would be more likely that a person would not get rid of their van. There are a lot of vans like that out there. I'm not from the area. I've cleaned up the van. Of course, if we stabbed her in it, there's going to be blood all over it. Who knows how you cover that up? You'd almost have to get rid of it, or maybe not. Maybe you do like, Jules and Vincent did in Pulp Fiction, and you just cover everything up with blankets. I don't know. So we can't even be sure that the killer is even from that area. But some questions that I would need to know I'd really want to know is how long had she been doing this? We have to realize that my understanding, once again, for all you women out there, me being a straight guy, I don't get guys paying for sex and doing this stuff. Don't ask me. I don't have a good answer for you. All right. I love women. I respect women. I realize that I'm still single here at almost 56 years old and everything else. But don't come to me as a woman and start asking me, why do guys go to Backpage and go to Craigslist and go to Pahrump and pay for sex? I don't know. That's not within my brain. No idea. So there's that. So I can't even put my mind in that. Just never going to happen at all. Zero. But my understanding of such things is that a lot of these women have repeat customers. And so I'd really want to know, well, how long had she been doing this? Of course, she was 21 years old. She could have been doing it for years. Just don't know. I don't know. No information out there. I'd want to know this. What was she telling people about these customers? And, in some ways, maybe we need to look at this the way we look at the Gilgo killer. That guy. Gilgo Beach guy. in that, and this is something I don't know. How many of these women who he ended up killing had he seen them before? Maybe not. Maybe these were all first timers. And we also have to remember that even though he killed a bunch of prostitutes up there in the Long Island area, my idea is that he actually was with some women who he didn't kill either. So we can't even say that whoever killed Chelsea is some sort of uncontrolled killing every woman that he sees. So it makes it difficult. You can see how when you really start thinking this out, it gets difficult pretty quickly. And going back to the Gilgo killer, maybe there is something you can use from that guy and what he had to say and his motivations to look at this guy who has gotten away with murder for 10 years. You know, we could go to a variety of extremes. We could say on one hand, he was some fanatic who, you know, don't think women should be doing that. And he signed up to kill her because she's a sinner. Just to put it that way. Or we could go to the whole opposite extreme and say that he did it because he had been with Chelsea many times. And then he knows that she's also having sex with other guys and he's jealous and he kills her. And then we have everything in between those two extremes, from guys just liking to abuse women and everything else. We also have to look at, why didn't this guy just shoot her? Easier to do that. If she's in the car, now it's going to be a little loud and your ears are going to be ringing for a while. But shooting her, you know, just once, of course, at close range, is much more assured of killing her than stabbing her in a vehicle at night. Of course, she's probably going to try to defend herself. She's going to have a lot of defense marks on her arms. There's no guarantee. So are we looking maybe at a prohibited possessor? Hello, Fishing. What's going on? Could we be looking at a guy who was illegal for this person to have a gun, so he used a knife instead? But I know what we also think, although I'm not sure if this is just pop psych or armchair psychology, or just, you know, from, you know, fictional true crime movies and TV shows. I think we also usually equate stabbings with something that's very, very personal. 11 stabbings. Well, it may very well be that, but maybe the guy kept stabbing her because she was still alive. And it very well may be that the reason that of course, she got out of the van, there probably would have been more. Because my thinking is once somebody decides to use a knife, they're going to keep stabbing until the person stops moving. So maybe 11 was just a start, and it could have been 30 had Chelsea not gotten out of the van. Of course, those 11 stabbings were enough to kill her. So it doesn't have to be, we don't have to look at the stabbings as some sort of crazed person. We may just look at it as a person who wanted her dead and just kept stabbing her because she was still moving. That's different. And, you know, could go on and on and on. What we don't know is phone information, but I think we can deduce after 10 years, if the phone information, whatever it was helpful, the person would have been caught by now. And what's hard to understand for me is that she was in this business. Of course, on the guy's part, Especially if he's married or has a girlfriend or is has reasons to cover this up and people to not know, we can understand if he might be using some apps or whatever else from 10 years ago, whatever that would be, to cover up his communications. Whereas when we look at Chelsea, would it be as likely? Maybe. Would she be communicating secretly? Maybe. But it's we have to start thinking about, well, if they have her phone and everything, then why didn't that lead to catching her killer? But I guess maybe what's more likely is that wherever her phone and everything ended up, they weren't with her. And given that she had to scramble to get out of the van, probably would lead us to believe that she was just scrambling in a van and she wasn't worried about taking anything with her. And so her phone and whatever else ended up still in the van with the killer, kind of reminding me of what was the disappearance, Brianna Vibert, right? Where her phone ended up being still in the vehicle of that guy who was driving around all night. And on that, for maybe the second time in the live show history, I'm going to take a break by going to the restroom, and I will be back in just a moment. Hey, when you got to go, you got to go. All right. To continue on just for a few more moments with Chelsea's murder, maybe we also need to understand the Burlington Coat Factory part of this. What were they going to do? Was this guy planning this? Was this planned for him to murder her in the parking lot? That sounds unlikely to me, but it seems that's what happened. Did he have a plan to take her somewhere to do this, and then she kind of got a bad vibe? She was trying to get out, and he had to do this to her earlier than he planned? Could be open to that. Certainly possible. But so I think I'm just going to leave it there for now. It seems some of you are going to check out the series. I'm going to check out the series. Of course, in doing so, I'm going to have to remember this is like the first time this police department has done this. I'll be interested to see if they got any. Of course, all police departments have a media department spokesperson. We'll just have to see how much thought was put into this. Hopefully they just didn't like turn the microphone on and start recording through GarageBand or something. I'm hoping this was planned out. I hope that I realize there's things they're not going to be able to say, but I just hope this just wasn't like thrown together. But I will certainly listen to it by the time we all get together this time next week. And if there's anything I think I need to comment on, after listening to the series, I'll do that next week. So we're just going to leave that there for now. But once again, I want to remind you, this was concerning the murder of Chelsea Yasser, and there's now a podcast out. It's actually done by the Aurora Police Department in Colorado, and the podcast is called The White Whale, the Chelsea Yasser Story. The murder of 21-year-old Chelsea Yasser, who was a sex worker, murdered in May of 2016. All right, moving on. I'm going to move on to the Lost Colony. This isn't, I'm not going to get way deep into this at all. But since we all got together last Tuesday, a listener had contacted me about a couple different things. But she wanted my best guess on the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Of course, this is going back to the 1500s. Of course, well before the United States became a country. And of course, what will we be talking? 350 years ago or something, some crazy number like that. 330 years ago, something crazy. And by the way, if you want to think about something that's truly crazy, just to go off on a little bit of a historical tangent for a moment, think about this. The United States has now existed. If we want to start with 1776, we realize that the Constitution and everything didn't happen until 1787 and all that. But as far as the Declaration of Independence, 250 years ago. Now, what's interesting about that, was still a longer period of time between, and I know Columbus, and I'm not getting into all that, but between Columbus coming to the United States or to the Caribbean or whatever. Once again, this isn't a history podcast. This isn't a history show. Him coming to the New World in 1492 to 1776 is still a longer amount of time. Despite the United States being around for 250 years, we are still not as old as that time period between Columbus getting there and 1776. So that is how long it took. What is that? 276? 284 years. It took 284 years from Columbus getting here to the United States being started. Think about that. And I realize, the British were here and all of that went on before the United States started. But you think about that. 284 years before the first Europeans getting here until the United States, we're still not there yet as far as a country. That's how young this country is. It was just kind of weird to me. All right, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Very, very simply, that some settlers in the New World were left here in the Roanoke area. And they were left there. And Sir Walter Raleigh, he left. And when they came back several years later, nobody was in the colony anymore. Seemingly, or something happened. And there were not overt signs of violence. There wasn't, of course, Native Americans were here, and certainly they had the problems with them. I'm like I said, this is not a history podcast, history live show. But they came back, and all of these people were gone. And you might notice every so many years, the History Channel or something, they start doing some story. They're digging in. Of course, it's all for entertainment. It's not historical. It's not real research. It's just to fill up time that they have on their channel. It's just to sell ads. You are not going, there is no new information about any of this. But in me, all I did was go to Wikipedia to try to cobble some ideas together. She asked me, this listener, what I thought. I know history a little bit. I will tell you, I'm not inclined to think that anything overtly violent happened here at all. I'm not inclined to think that they're there and have these Native Americans here who already lived here for a long time, and we know what went on. And because they were pissed that these people were there, they went in there and took them all away. I'm not inclined to believe that. I can see back at the time in the late 1500s into the 1600s and onward where that would have been a great story to really rouse people up, to inflame them, that we have to do something against these native peoples, and we know all that went on. I'm just not inclined to believe that happened. I think the reason I think that way is because these settlers, however many, Virginia Dare, the rest of them, they knew that nobody was coming back for a while. And so they were essentially on their own. And I think if you're in that situation, okay, we got this town here and we've done this, but you know what? If we start having problems and we think it's going to be better elsewhere, and maybe if they have been having problems with the locals or whoever else, they think, you know what? Even though, yeah, we're supposed to stay here and they're expecting us to be here whenever they get back, we're more worried about our survival in contrast to keeping our word or keeping this property or whatever else. I'm more inclined to think that happened. I think that if it had really been something violent, that when they did return all those years later, there would have been overt signs of it. And it does seem that they're, of course, being that the little town there or whatever was empty, I'm guessing that I'm just going to call them Native Americans, had come through there and done things and whatever. And you also have to understand, once again, my reading as quickly as I could do for tonight, you find out when you really get into this, it really was not, it was a mystery. But I would not say that the people of the 1600s from England and elsewhere really, really put a ton of time into trying to figure out what happened. It seems to me it really wasn't a thing. It wasn't like, let's just compare it to like Flight 370. Here we are over 10 years later, people still wondering what happened to it, people doing videos about it. Jeff Wise has his channel and all these TV shows, Netflix and everything else. They did not do that back then. They just didn't. It really wasn't a thing. They were there, then they weren't, and people were like, oh, well. It really did not become something that got into the lexicon of being talked about until the 1800s. Like 200, almost 250 years later, when the first story was written about Virginia Dare, a little girl born and all that. That's when it became a thing. Up until that point, everybody was like, we really don't care. It just wasn't a thing. There wasn't, overt need for retribution. Them going after the Native Americans for what they thought they did. The investigations you find out were pretty half-assed in trying to figure out what happened. And in fact, Raleigh himself really didn't want to find them, if we're to believe Wikipedia. He just wasn't that concerned. He had his own concerns going on. Of course, eventually he was charged with treason and everything else. He had his own issues going on. But it does seem to me there were racists at the time that wanted to blame the Native Americans. It was a convenient story. But like I stated, my attitude when I look at it is that these people were here. They were left here. They probably figured we got to figure out for ourselves how we're going to survive. If that means assimilating with the Native Americans or whatever they were calling them at the time, that's what we're going to do. We're going to make nice. And I know they're, they don't look like we do, and they don't dress like we do, and they have different forms of communication than we do. But here's what we think we know. If we want to live, we're going to have to make nice with them because they know what's going on here and we don't. This is a strange land to us. It's not a strange land to them. We're going to have to make nice with them. And certainly there are things about our knowledge of, metals and whatever else that we've brought from Europe that can help them, and they can help us with hunting and everything. It can really, work out here. That's what I would do. If you want to live, that's what you got to do. Unless you just want to, decide, hey, we're here. We're not going to be like you, and you want to fight it out at the time. And of course, they were horribly outnumbered. We're just going to have to play nice. Hello, Marty. I see you, Marty. Yes. Yeah, you're always late, Marty. That's okay. I agree with all that. One thing to add is that, if I recall correctly, the trip back to get supplies and check on the settlers was delayed due to lack of funding. Yeah. It was like, what was it? Like 7 years or something? They left them to fend for themselves there. And then it wasn't until like 7 years later that people came back to check on them. I mean, what do you want? What do you want? And we have to remember something else is that the reason this entire continent or this area of North America eventually got populated was because people just kept going west. Manifest destiny. So maybe they figured out the same thing. Hey, we're here. This is tough. They're up in Virginia. Of course, Virginia gets cold and they have snow and everything else. And by that time, they knew the farther you go south, the warmer it is. They're like, let's go somewhere where you don't have to worry about some of these things. But that's too simple maybe for people at the History Channel and everything else. So they have to come up with some sensational theory every so many years so as to have a series, so they can sell ads and everything. That's my answer. I'm not not a history professor, and I realize that there's competing theories, and some, eventually later other explorers ended up encountering tribes that looked like they were maybe a mixture of white Europeans and Native Americans who had darker skin and all that. Maybe. Yeah, fine. And I even read somewhere in that Wikipedia article written about the lost colony is what they found was that when people would come to this country early on, and for whatever reason, they had a lot of dealings with the people who were already here, is that a lot of them, these new people coming from Europe or wherever, kind of liked the new lifestyle. And a lot of them didn't want to go back. Didn't want to go back to doing things and dressing and, the puritanical stuff and all that. They didn't want to do that. So maybe that's what happened with these people at the lost colony of Roanoke as well. I just don't think it's that big of a mystery. I realize that a lot of people, just like the JFK assassination, everything else, people need their stories. It's just not that big of a mystery to me. All right, let's go to talking for the rest of the time about the disappearance of Dorothy Scofield, Scofield. And this is a disappearance that happened almost exactly 50 years ago. And in fact, that's why I picked it. I wanted to look at July of 1976 to see unsolved disappearances that are almost exactly 50 years old. How many disappearances occurred in the month of this country turning 200? And I decided to pick out Dorothy Scofield's. It's a little bit unique in that she was only 12 when she went missing. And you know me, I'm more drawn to adult disappearances. Although I'll talk to anybody, but that is the disappearance. So I'm going to do like I usually do. I'm going to read the what was written at the Charlie Project. I'm going to add some other things that I learned from some articles that were written actually at the time for Dorothy's disappearance. And then I'm going to do additional questions. And then I'm going to give you my idea of what happened to Dorothy Scofield. All right. Dorothy and her mother left their Ocala, Florida. Once again, this happened coincidentally right up the road, 2.5 hours away. That's not how I planned it. She and her mother left their Ocala, Florida residence together on July 22nd of 1976. Her mother was taking a driving test, and while she was doing that, Dorothy was going to go to a mall that was like a quarter mile away, was going to walk there to exchange a pair of sandals at a department store there. I think it had something to do with her brother, a birthday gift or something like that. And there was a couple other things that Dorothy was going to be doing there. And then she was to return, and she and her mother were to meet up at a certain location, at a certain time. Then my understanding is they were going to go to the movies or something. Dorothy returned the shoes and was last seen at the mall at approximately 2 p.m. that day. Dorothy never met her mother at the designated location they had agreed on, and she immediately reported her daughter missing. Dorothy was never seen again. So this is one of those, and we know, I don't know how common they are, but they're probably not as common as we think. But this is the old child goes to a mall, never seen again kind of disappearance. And I guess maybe what's unique is that I don't think that we've featured one like that on Unfound yet. Like I said, maybe just because I kind of shy away a little bit from child disappearances. A witness reported seeing a girl matching Dorothy's description 2 hours after she was reported missing. The child was in Newbies, a convenience store at the intersection of Highway 40 and State Road Highway 314, less than a mile from the Ocala National Forest. And this girl was seemingly with one or two adult males. But you should know that this convenience store was not close to the mall. Important to remember that. And according to this witness, this clerk, they purchased sodas and left. The witness claims that this child, a little girl, was shaking and appeared to be very frightened. The girl and the adult male companion or companions were never identified, and law enforcement authorities are not sure if she was in fact Dorothy. A sketch of a possible suspect is posted with the case summary on the Charlie Project page. Dorothy is the youngest of 5 children and lived with her family in a mobile home in Citra, Florida in 1976. That's Citra. She was an honor student at Marion High School, middle school. She regularly attended church and worked at her parents' barbecue restaurant. Investigators do not believe she ran away from home, as she was not having any personal problems at the time of her disappearance. It should also be noted that the Scofields had not been in Florida that long. They had moved from Ohio, I think, earlier that year, or maybe the year before. but they, as a family, had not been in Florida for very long at all. Something to think about. You should also know that after this happened, there was a hoax call that I think might be a little noteworthy, although there was a call about how this person allegedly had Dorothy and was asking for a ransom. This was eventually proven to be a hoax. I think they actually ended up figuring out who this person was. Dorothy's father died in 1991, so 15 years later. It very well may be that her mother is still alive here in 2026, although probably she would have to be maybe into her 90s. There are articles about the national forest being searched. And you should know that less than 2 years later, there was a little girl, younger, whose name was Trissa, Trisa Thornley, who went missing about a year and a half later while walking home from school. I'll come back to that. I will also state the child disappearances are not necessarily my big time expertise. And to go through why that is, for purposes of the podcast, a lot of times you don't know if parents can be trusted. I never want to have somebody on my podcast, except maybe for Steve Pankey, who ends up being the best suspect in that particular disappearance. I really, 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 really want to avoid that. We also have to remember that sometimes children are, tools in custody battles. That makes covering their disappearances difficult. It also makes it difficult, especially when we get into older, maybe 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. We realize that teenagers have secret lives, and parents are unwilling to reveal some of these things after the fact. So even if you do have the parent on of a missing 12, 13, 14-year-old, it very well may be that the parent withholds things because of that. So that's some of the reasons that, although I'll talk to anybody, I really, really do not go out of my way to feature child disappearances. Although, like I said, I'll talk to anybody. And it's also the reason when you look at the Unfound database, you have disappearances that mainly, start at about the age 25 and up. And that's why, even though I consider myself to be a disappearance expert, my concentration is really in the disappearances of adults, not children. Although I think I'm pretty good at predicting the disappearances of children as well. So, all right. So we have a girl, 12 years old, with her mother going. The mother's taking a test. She's going to the mall. Dorothy is never seen again. And like I stated, there's many disappearances that kind of follow this general template, mainly because, of course, malls are kind of on a downturn these days. But there was a time when all teenagers and children went to the mall to hang out. And those then would be places that are target rich for child molesters, abductors, kidnappers, and all of that. We shouldn't be surprised by that. No different than the saying that I have regarding such things. There was a very famous bank robber, like from the 1920s. He was asked, well, why do you rob banks? His reply was, that's where the money is. So if you're answering, why do child molesters go to malls? The answer is, that's where kids are. Why do child molesters end up being priests? Because of altar boys. Why do child molesters end up being Boy Scout leaders? Because there's boys there. On and on and on and on and on and on and on. That's why. That's not a coincidence. So, questions. I would start here. If I were doing a consultation, as you can see there, missingpersonsconsulting.com. And if this were a disappearance, if I were talking to someone in her family today, I'm certainly open to that. They can email me, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. I would start here in my questioning. And Marty says that's so horrible, but it's true. Yeah. Regarding how child molesters and and perverts and everything end up doing those things. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. That's the way the world works. I'd start with this. Who knew that Dorothy and her mother were doing that day? Who knew that the mother was going to take this test and that Dorothy would be going alone to the mall? I'm guessing not a ton of people would know that. And it very well may be that whoever did know it had nothing to do with it. But I would really want to know that, because I think I've made it clear. I'm not a big overt. When I think about these types of things with adults, I don't default to this was some chance encounter, although they do happen, like Morgan Harrington on the campus of Virginia Tech. We're going to the Metallica concert. She happened to run into the wrong guy. These things do happen. Chance encounters, wrong place, wrong time, do happen. But I would still start there. Who knew that the mother and Dorothy, just the two of them, were going, and what the agenda was? Of course, being that she was 12, I think that we also have to start asking about boys. If she were 10, no. If she were 11, probably not. But you start getting to 12 years old, depending on maturity and when puberty and all that stuff kicks in. And as of course, I don't have any kids. I think at 12 years old, I think I'd have to bring up the boy topic, just to be sure. I'd also want to know, I'd have to also try to figure out, is there causation and correlation between her family moving from Ohio to Florida and her going missing? So that would be along the lines of, well, how was she doing here? Yeah, okay, she was doing well in school, but what was she telling her friends at school, the new friends, the kids there? How was she truly adapting? Was she really liking it, or was she just saying that she was liking it? You'd think because she was doing well in school that things were going well, but it's certainly one indicator, but it wouldn't seal the deal for me. So I'd really want to know is, well, how was she doing? Of course, this is a couple decades before email and everything. Was she writing letters back to her friends? Was she talking to them on the phone from back in Ohio? Were there any plans for any of those families to come vacation in Florida? Did the Scofield still have family up in Ohio? I'd really need to know all about that as well. And I'm guessing it's maybe been done somewhere, because I'm guessing that there's a higher incidence of runaways when kids move, their family moves from one state to another or whatever, than kids who don't move. I'm guessing, when kids get displaced and they want to go back to their hometowns and they miss their hometowns and friends, they're more likely to run away than kids who have lived in the same town since they were born. That seems likely. Has anybody done any studies on that? I don't know. But I'd also want to point out, it doesn't seem that anybody actually saw her leave the mall. Of course, this is before video cameras and things. So we have witnesses of her in the mall. She did these things. Nobody came forward to actually ever say that saw her leave the mall. Okay. What I'd also want to know is it seems that she had more than one thing to do when she went to the mall. I think it said here. And there were other things in the articles. And just in the Charlie Project, it says return a pair of sandals. And she also planned to buy a birthday present for her brother. Well, were there any other things that she wanted to do or supposed to do? Did she do everything that she was supposed to do when she went to the mall? And what we also might look at is, was there anything that she did in the mall that her mother didn't know that she was doing? Did she go to a store and buy something that her mother was like, well, I didn't know that she was going to do that? I need to know more about that. I know this is getting very technical, but we really, really, really need to understand what was going on with her while she was by herself. Because it doesn't seem that any witnesses saw her with anybody at the mall. I realize we have this other sighting, and I don't know if I'm supposed to believe that or not. You know, way down the road near the forest, I don't know. But at the mall, did she do everything she was supposed to do, or did she only do half of it? Or did she even do more? Did she seen in other stores doing things? Or did she just go do those things and immediately leave to meet her mother? I'd want to know that. I'd also have to think about what are the odds that an abduction occurs and no one sees it? If she were abducted, how is it that nobody saw it? Now, this was during the summer. More people probably going to be at the mall. I didn't check to see what day of the week it was. What are the odds of that? I can't say. I'd really want to know what the mother did. It does seem like the mother, I'm not suspecting the mother of anything in this disappearance, but I would want to know exactly what did the mother do when Dorothy didn't show up. Did she drive her to the mall? Did she walk around the mall? Did she immediately get on it? How long did she wait? Did she wait 5 minutes? Did she wait an hour? This all matters. And was the meeting place in a spot where the mall could be seen? Like I said, I think the mother was at the DMV taking a test. I think Dorothy had to walk 500 yards, so over a quarter of a mile. So was Dorothy supposed to meet her mother back at the DMV? Were they supposed to meet halfway? Was the mother going to meet her at the mall? I couldn't find any of that information. It matters. It absolutely matters. Marty, I wonder what her disposition would be with strangers. Was she more reserved? Was she open to talking with strangers? Sure, certainly. I think we just have to put that under the heading of, was she seen talking to any adults? Was she seen with anybody at the mall? I guess the answer is no. I'd also want to know, did anybody that Dorothy knew work at the mall? Of course, her family had not been in that area for very long. But still, did she know anybody at all? Of course, children probably not working at the mall at 12 years old. But any parents of any of her friends working at the mall? Could she have encountered a friend with a parent at the mall? In addition, of course, maybe most importantly, any other stories of any child abduction attempts there. I'm going to get back to Trissa Thornley in a moment. So those would all be things that I would be asking now in 2026. Can you find answers to those things? I don't know. But those are things that came to mind in reading on Charlie Project, reading NamUs, reading articles that were written about Dorothy's disappearance, just to get a better idea about her and the situation that day. Now, if you're wondering, I went and looked at this. This is Marion County, Florida, if you're wondering. wondering, Marion. Dorothy's disappearance is the only unsolved one in that county in the 1970s for anybody of any age. Rockford, had she stopped for a brother or a relative before, wondering if her story was coached? Don't know. Good question, Rockford. I think we just have to remember they hadn't lived there a lot long. Was this her first time to the mall? Maybe that's a good one too, Rockford. But we have to understand how rare this is when we start talking about, well, were there other children being abducted? This is the only unsolved Marion County disappearance in the 1970s. So whatever happened, pretty rare for there. And in fact, for all of Florida, not just Marion County, all of Florida, there are still only 17 children missing between the ages of 7 and 15 during the entire 1970s in the state of Florida. Now, granted, the population back then wasn't what it is now, but still I think that's a considerable stat. For all of the 70s, between the ages of 7 and 15, there are only 17 children still missing. So whatever happened to her, once again, rare. So for my analysis, when we start thinking about things like this, at least when it comes to children, we have to put it in one of three categories: planned versus spontaneous versus opportunist. And what do I mean by that? Well, planned, of course, would mean the abductor knew that she was going to be there and was waiting. Spontaneous means the abductor went to the mall for some other reason, kind of has it in it, kind of perv, molester anyway, but is there to do some shopping, comes across Dorothy by herself. And then opportunist would mean person, perv, going to the mall, kind of just hanging out, not sure if they're going to abduct anybody or kid or not, but is there to ogle children anyway. So this is how you have to analyze this for something like this. Planned versus spontaneous versus opportunist. It's one of them. Now, if you look at Morgan Harrington, of course, she was an adult, but still, that was in the opportunist. It's clear to me that the guy who ended up killing her was cruising around that campus looking for somebody. He didn't know Morgan Harrington was going to be there. In addition, though, he wasn't on campus for some other reason. He was there hoping to find somebody, a young woman, to abduct, but didn't know that Morgan Harrington specifically was going to be there. As far as the sighting, you know how I feel about these things. They almost never come true. To think that some clerk many miles down the road, noticed this and recognized Dorothy from a picture, however long later, it's just not very likely. I think we also have to think of it in this terms. Would some guy or men who just abducted Dorothy really allow her out of a car to go into some convenience store with that, even if she's not like handcuffed to him or anything? Would they really do that? No, of course not. So I reject this. I'm inclined to dismiss it. Would really kidnappers really allow her out of the car? The odds of clerk recognizing Dory are very remote. These kinds of sightings usually go nowhere. Now, if it were right down the street, right next to the mall, okay, maybe. But it was not right down the street, so I'd reject it. Rockford, I'm thinking about Amy Cleveland area, who was surely abducted and had been fed a reason to go to the shopping center from where she disappeared. Maybe Rockford. Couldn't find that in any of the literature regarding Dorothy's disappearance. It does seem that her mother, it was the mother's agenda to go take this test this day, and they kind of just all wrapped it up into one trip. That's the way I read it. And it was just, okay, mother has to go do this. So while I'm doing this, Dorothy, why don't you go and do this? Now, if you're thinking that her mother set this whole thing up, I don't know. But you'd think that just would have happened immediately before Dorothy ever got to the mall. But, and unfortunately, I'm not overtly familiar with Amy Mahajevic's Cleveland, who was surely abducted and had been fed a reason to go to the shopping center. It doesn't sound to me like Dorothy was fed a reason. It seemed like there was a definite agenda here to do things. And it seems she did those things successfully. Now, what's the counter argument? And I know I'm running out of time. Teresa Thornley went missing January 1978. She was abducted. She was eventually found murdered in a forest, but only 3 miles from where she lived in Aurora, where she lived with her family. Now, what's notable here is that she was killed by a guy who knew her family. The guy's name was Aubrey Adams. He was a friend of the Thornley family, and he was a corrections officer. I think he was only 21 years old at the time. And the way he got caught was that after this happened and they were still looking for Teresa's body, he was calling the family and terrorizing them, making obscene calls. And well, they were actually able to find out that it was he who was making the calls. And then I guess they were successful in proving he was the one who had abducted Teresa and murdered her. So he knew her. So this was planned. He planned to do this. He knew that Teresa was going to be walking home alone from school and was waiting. And you should know that the state of Florida eventually ended up executing him. He was dead, died in the electric chair like over 30 years ago. Now, was he looked at for Dorothy's disappearance? He was. When they figured out what happened to Teresa a couple years later, found her body, figured out that he did it. They did look at him. No conclusive evidence whether he had anything to do with Dorothy's disappearance. I guess they couldn't prove that he was at the mall that day. I'm guessing they couldn't prove that he knew the Scofield family. Remember, they were somewhat new to Florida. But I also have to think if he had not made these calls, they probably would have gotten away with Teresa's murder, at least maybe until DNA came along. But you do have to remember, I'll remind you, there was this hoax call for Dorothy's disappearance as well. So could Aubrey have taken Dorothy? Possible. Was it checked? Yes, they tried to make a connection unsuccessfully. I guess that doesn't mean he couldn't have done it. I think we also have to remember that these things don't have to be done in isolation. Remember Jacob Wetterling. He was abducted right in front of his friends. He was with 2 other boys. The guy came up, took Jacob, left the other 2 behind. And despite these boys having being able to say what happened and having a description, of course, Jacob's disappearance and murder went unsolved for a long time. Jacob Wetterling was wrong place, wrong time. So we have to be open to the idea that Dorothy could have just been wrong place, wrong time as well. I also want to know, though, remember, when her family moved to Florida, they started this barbecue restaurant. Of course, when you run a restaurant, you end up knowing a lot of people. And Dorothy did work or help out at her family's restaurant. And so, should we be open to that? She's in there and encounters some patron of the restaurant who happens to be a perv. So would maybe want to know more about the clientele of people who were going to the restaurant. I mean, that, all these years later, probably even impossible to do. But it's an idea. So she goes to the mall, never seen again. Maybe there are people out there who might have suspected her mother kind of set this up. It's just way too complicated for me. I'm not saying it's never happened. Parents, of course, do cause the disappearances of their children. I think there was enough proof to know that the mother went and actually did take her DMV test that day. And certainly I'd want to know how quickly she alerted authorities that her daughter was missing. But there's nothing I saw anywhere that took her, 12 hours to do it or several hours to do it. So I guess I have to be inclined that Dorothy went to that mall and somebody else caused her disappearance. I don't think that she ran away simply because she went and did those things. What did she do? Go buy those things and then decide to leave? I mean, she would have had money if she's going to run away. Wouldn't she just run away with the money? You'd think she didn't do that. So I'm inclined that she was abducted, but if I were a detective back in 1976 for all of this, I would not have taken the sighting seriously from many miles away. And I would have taken a long, hard look at the people around the Scofield family. I think that statistically, that would have been the best way to continue. Why? Because like I said, she's the only missing child in Marion County for the entire 1970s. So it's not like there was some, serial kidnapper of children in that area at the time. There just wasn't. Yes, we have Aubrey and what he did to Teresa, but still, this seems like a disappearance that is unique to Dorothy because she's still the only one missing. So I'm inclined to believe it was somebody who knew Dorothy, who might have known that she was going to be there by herself that day, or she unfortunately encountered that person while she was at the mall that day by herself. So what can you do now? Certainly her siblings, some of her siblings are still alive. I'm more than happy to talk to them at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com if they want to email me. I would start checking all the people that were around the men around the Scofield family at the time and see what all of those guys have done with their lives since 1976. Do any of them have assault charges, molestation charges, sexual predator charges? Are they on a sex list somewhere? I think that's where you'd have to start with this. It just seems to me that if this were some random encounter, I think we would have had more of stuff like this in that county. We don't. So I'm inclined to think this was something unique to Dorothy, meaning somebody who knew her. Could have been planned. Could have been something spontaneous. I'm open to any of that. So that's Dorothy Scofield. Like I said, Charlie Project elsewhere. I don't think there's ever been a podcast or anything done on her disappearance. So for this Friday, kind of already talked about it. I'm going to interview Eric. I think that's happening tomorrow. We're just going to go over everything to kind of wrap everything up, being that he was the first interview, did a lot of work setting everything up for some parts of this series. Going to give him an opportunity to give his insight to disappearances that were featured. And we will call it a day for the Atlantic series. You can look for that this Friday. Supposed to do the interview tomorrow night. But that's all I have for you tonight. So I got it done. Dorothy Scofield, murder of Chelsea Yasser, the Lost Colony. I had a lot of other things, but just ran out of time. So there you go. Thank you all for taking time out of your Monday night to join me. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. Give this a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Support Unfound. Send anybody you know to missingpersonsconsulting.com. Charlie, say hi to your sons for me. I hope you have a good time in Ohio. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not end up on my podcast. Good night.